that sent me down the rabbit hole of how can I work for myself? How can I make money? And I found online business. I found out that people could take their knowledge from their head, put it online, and serve customers virtually.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are getting some great value, I would love to hear from you and get some of your honest feedback. Leave us a rating and review. It helps us, but it also helps other listeners find this show. And if you haven't done so, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Today, you are in for a treat. We've got a very special guest. We're bringing on my friend and my coach, Mr. Shane Sams. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Now, Shane Sams is a speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur known for helping people build and grow online businesses through courses, coaching, and community memberships. Now, as the co-founder of Flipped Lifestyle, Shane empowers individuals to earn income online, take control of their time, and achieve personal freedom. He is also the host of the Flipped Lifestyle podcast, where he shares success stories and practical strategies with his audience. Let's welcome to the show, Shane Sams.
My man, John Casman. What are you doing, buddy? How you going, man? How's it going?
I am good. It's good to see you.
I'm fired up. I'm excited to be here, baby.
I'm excited to have you. Shane, I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take a couple minutes, man, and fill in some of the gaps on your story?
Yeah, man. So I used to be a school teacher in Southeast Kentucky. And, I was kind of happy, man. I was teaching history, coaching football, and coming home at 3:00 and summers off, baby. You know what I'm saying? But the problem was I had no money. I just had never had any money, man. I was like, am I going to do this for the next 30 years? And, the funny thing is, I probably would have done that for 30 years if something had not happened to me. And a lot of times in all of our life and all of our stories, we have a catalyst. And what happened to me was one day I found out that my son was being horribly mistreated in a daycare center. And I did not know at the time the extent of it. But I needed the day off work. And unfortunately, I got to school a little late that day. There was a policy where if you were already there, you couldn't get a sub. And my boss basically told me that I had to handle my personal problems after work. And dude, I realized in that moment that I had no freedom. I had traded all of my life away for a paycheck that never made it to the next one. And that sent me down the rabbit hole of how can I work for myself? How can I make money? Like you got all the guys out there investing in real estate, trying to create their own income, doing stuff like that. And I found online business. I found out that people could take their knowledge from their head, put it online, and serve customers virtually from anywhere in the world. And my wife and I, we started a couple businesses. We started our first businesses were actually education companies. We sold like curriculum and lesson plans to schools. That's what we originally did. I know you're a football coach. I actually even had a business where I was selling playbooks, baby. The Shane Sams 3-5-3 defense was going coast to coast for a while, man. We were selling them everywhere, dude. I was dominating youth football fields from sea to shining sea. And but we started these businesses and they really took off, man. And our basic principle was, can we create digital resources that people can access from anywhere? And can we get 1,000 people to pay us $50 a month? There's 8 billion people on the planet. All we need is 1,000. And we're making more money than we could have ever imagined. And we had a couple of them take off. My wife's business was called elementarylibrarian.com. We actually sold that business on a 7-figure contract back in 2017. And I had no intention of teaching people anything that I do. I was enjoying my 4-hour work weeks and sitting on my back porch. But what happened was a friend of ours here locally said, hey, can you teach me how to do that? And 3 months later, she quit her job. And then everybody started asking us. And then we started going on podcasts and telling our story after we sold our business. And all of a sudden, we had this groundswell of people that were asking us how we teach our specific style of online business. And that exploded. The first webinar we ever had, we had 120 people join it. I was absolutely gobsmacked, shocked. And it got so big that we ended up just, selling or shutting down all of our other companies. And, for the past decade, we've been helping people flip their lives with online business.
Shane, I love it, man. And I've been fortunate enough to get to know you and work with you and learn more about your story. And every time I hear it, man, it catches me. And as a father of two boys, there was those times for sure where my boys were in daycare, and I remember my wife, she picked a daycare, and we moved to Cincinnati, and I didn't have a chance to go with her and look at it. And
Oh, that's nerve wracking.
the first time I stepped foot in it, I really questioned her decision-making ability. I was like, this place?
Dude,
And
listen, when I dropped Isaac off for the first time, I want to stress this daycare when we moved to my town was the premier place to go.
mm,
And we knew the owner, and my family was friends. And what happened was she retired and new people took over, and it went downhill before anybody else knew what was going on. They eventually shut the place down. The lady went to jail, actually.
oh wow.
But like when we dropped, I remember the first day we dropped Isaac, my son, off at daycare. And when we walked out of the daycare, my wife, Jocelyn, just fell into my arms and started crying that she did that. And like, I think there was maybe a spark of it there over the next couple years where I really started questioning, are we going to work so someone else can see our kids? Like, what are we doing, man? There's got to be like some kind of better way to make it.
Yeah, man. And I love hearing the story. One, knowing it has a happy ending, but two, just that catalyst, right? That was the thing that pushed you into action. You hear people say, "Well, what's your why?" And sometimes you need something like that to, to smack you in the face to make you go
Heck
from,
yeah.
"Oh, well, it'd be nice to be my own boss," or "nice to have my own job," or "nice to have this portfolio," to like, "Oh no, I need to make this happen. I need to make it happen now." You talked about that process for you, starting with, your wife kind of selling some educational materials, you selling some playbooks, starting out and doing some other things. What was that process like for you just to get started? Like
Yeah.
research wise, just kind of launching this initial business. Were there hurdles or obstacles that you had to overcome to get this thing going? Tell us more about
Oh
those
yeah,
early
man.
days.
Big time. And I want to stress you'd be proud of me, John, because we have always put our money into land and houses. So that's where it's sitting, baby. So I'm picking up what you're putting down, is what I'm saying on the show. But when I think that people, I hate, there's two questions I hate. And I think I can say this with some authority. I've coached over 6,000 entrepreneurs through our program. I have over 1,000 podcasts, and I only talk to my members on the Flip Lifestyle podcast. So I've had 1,000 conversations with our members, all of our coaching students, and all the programs that we have. And there's these two questions that always people bring with them. The first one is, what do you want? And the second question is, what is your why? And what I always find is if the why is something painful, I've got a student that's going to make it. If the why is just beaches in Malibu and Caribbean trips, maybe about half of them will make it. You know what I'm saying? Because they're kind of motivated. And then that question, though, that when that question is answered in pain, like you're really wanting to get away from something and move towards something, not just move towards something, you're just so much more intrinsically motivated because we will do anything to get our hand off the hot stove. That's how humans are wired in their nervous system and emotionally. And then that takes you to that second question, is that what do you want? And so many entrepreneurs, investors, real estate guy, everybody looks at that question as a desire for me, right? But my why forced me to want something for my kids first, get them out of the daycare, something for my wife. She wouldn't ever have to feel like that ever again when she dropped off my son, something for me so that I, as a man, and just my masculine self, could feel like I was providing the good life for my family and not just a life where we barely were getting by. And if you take those things and stack them up, that's what kind of drove me out of the classroom. Now, my wife at the time, dude, she was totally not on board with this. Like, she was like, "What are you talking about?" This was 12 years ago, man. Online business was a scam back then. Like, that was before everybody made money online and we all live on Chat GPT every day, right? So I'm telling her about all these stories that I'm collecting and finding. And I'm a good storyteller, but she wasn't listening to my stories. And I was telling her all this stuff, and she's like, "You have to go and prove this works before I'm going to jump on board with your dream." Well, in our relationship, I'm often the gas pedal and Jocelyn is often the brake, right? And we flip sometimes. So I struggled, man. I didn't know how to code websites. I didn't know we didn't have tools like Kajabi and these amazing tools we have now. I didn't know the first thing about sales and marketing. Um, so I really struggled. There was like 4 to 6 months, dude. I was putting in every second of my life into this, trying to figure this out. I was buying courses with money we didn't have, yard sales to pick up an extra $29 website hosting package, or just whatever I could do to force myself to do this. Um, and then what really turned it around was I got a mentor. I got a coach. Like, everybody needs coaches. Everybody needs mentors. I don't care if you're doing real estate. I don't care if you're investing. I don't care if you're buying the houses or just putting your money in them. If you're starting an online business, like, it's stupid to do everything alone. And I realized I'm being stupid. And I got a mentor. His name was Pat Flynn. He has a website, a podcast called the Smart Passive Income Podcast, one of the first real business podcasts in the Apple platform. And I was lucky enough to meet Pat early in my journey and get him before he got kind of famous. And so he was really like telling me some things that were interesting, like, right? Like, hey, whatever you do, just get something up. It's done is better than perfect. So I was like, okay, well, it's done is better than perfect. I'll throw some mud on the wall. And then start an email list. It's one of the first things I put on my website, right? So I was able to trial and error this with a little guidance toward the end of my journey. And then all of a sudden, one of my websites started getting traffic when I started getting a little bit more organized with what I was doing and picking and not learning everything on my own. And then all of a sudden, I put Google ads on my website. And I was about to give up. My wife was getting really frustrated with me. And she was literally like, "You have to stop this next week. This is not going anywhere." And one night we were laying in bed, man, and somebody went to my website and clicked an ad, and I got an 11-cent commission, a dime and a penny. And you would have thought that I just inherited the White House. I like jumped up off the bed, started going crazy, freaking out. Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I made money on the internet." And my wife was like, "This is amazing, but like, it's 11 cents. Like, we can't buy groceries with 11 cents. Like, what are we going to do here?" And I was like, "Well, it makes sense though. If we could get 11 cents, couldn't we get $11? We just had to find that one person that would give us $11 for something. And then could we find 1,000 people to do that? If we could, this actually has traction." And that's when we started brainstorming these ideas together. And all of my failures in the first 6 months were gold, because we were able to launch our real second attempt together in like 30 days, right? I knew the path that I had worn down behind me, and I could get us to the finish line faster. And that's when we started building audience. That's where we started having webinars. That's where we started selling our own information and wisdom and coaching through libraries and history classes and coaching programs. So, it was so valuable for me to fail that spectacularly in those first 6 months, because without every single lesson from those first 6 months, we never would have started the business that, changed our family's future.
Shannon, I appreciate you sharing that about your journey, man. Just really, really helpful to understand where you were, what motivated you to get going. And you talked about that why having to be painful enough to really force you to success, because failure is not an option at that point, right? So
Mm-hmm.
highly motivated to succeed, dedicating your time, resources you didn't even have to try to
Yep.
learn this, figure it out. And then ultimately you mentioned things really started to change when you found your mentor and coach,
Yes.
working with Pat Flynn and getting that direction, starting to have someone guide you down the pathway. Cause now you're learning off of their mistakes and, their things that they've done
Exactly.
in the past as
What
well.
did Pat fail in the first year that I got to glean from him because I actually went out and listened to someone else? Like, it's just like real estate. Hey guys, there's laws. It all works the same. Like real estate is the thing. You just need a guide to get you there faster so you're not at the library reading books about real estate or something crazy. And it was the same thing with online business, man.
Yeah, I love it, man. So you figured that out with online business, starting with the 11 cents, transitioning that to, okay, how do I, get more people to pay us? How do we help more people throughout this process? And ultimately you ended up, like you said, helping other folks
Sure.
through the community that you've built. Can you talk to me a little bit more about the community and kind of how you help entrepreneurs, especially since, I know some people come from completely different walks of lives and it may seem like it has no overlap versus,
Oh yeah.
real estate. Most of our people are all real estate investors. You're working with entrepreneurs from completely different walks of life. So talk to me more about that.
So it's funny, like when we realized we could help people, that was the first thing. Like we really had this like, when we saw us like waking up with our kids, like I've got this amazing picture from one of like the second or third day that we were full-time entrepreneurs of I had a University of Kentucky blanket on the floor and we had this little bitty 13-inch TV and I've got this picture of Isaac and Anna Joe in onesies eating breakfast watching this thing, the TV, right? And then when our friend Lindsay quit her job, like it just hit me like she's at home right now watching her kids eat breakfast and watching cartoons. And that really like lit a passion in us like, hey, we can help other families who want to do this. I openly say like I don't want to take you from 250,000 to a million, even though I've got clients that do that, right? I want to free you so that you control your time and you control your finances. And that was kind of the passion behind that. And it was so funny because our mentor, Pat Flynn, was having this live event out in San Diego. And we had this loose idea for what flipped lifestyle would become. But we needed to get some more advice. There was going to be another coach there named Chris Ducker, and we wanted to talk to everybody there in a mastermind setting to really flesh this out. And I was like, but Jocelyn, the main thing I've got to do is I've got to tell them our story. I've got to be able to tell them all the bits and pieces in this mastermind so that they understand what we're trying to build and what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it so we can really get a good direction sense from them. And there was in the mastermind, you bought a slot and you only got a 15-minute hot seat. And I was not, you know me, I talk way more than 15 minutes any chance I get. So I was like, Jocelyn, let's both go. We'll buy two slots, but let me do all the talking. I want to go ahead and tell the story of the brand, right? So that's what I did, and I told this story, and I really focused on like I wanted them to feel every emotion I felt in that story. I didn't want to just tell them the facts of what happened. I wanted them to know like the real emotion behind it, so they could feel the passion in what we were doing. And it was so beautiful because I mean, literally people were like laughing, crying, like just, and I used the whole 30 minutes of both hot seats. And I was like, I had 1 minute left. And I was just basically like, that's what we want to do. Do you think this is a good idea? And everyone was just so like, yes, do this. And all the feedback. I mean, I probably got extra 30 minutes just of everybody getting excited about our idea. And that moment was what taught me like it's not about teaching people online business. It doesn't matter what walk of life they come from. Business is just like real estate. Online business works the same for every single company out there. You have to build audience. You have to get discovered. You have to build your own customer list. You have to follow up with those with email automations. You have to do live events and webinars to sell things. And then you have to serve people in your courses, coaching, and community program. It's all the same. I don't care if you're teaching real estate or online business or you're raising chickens in your backyard. That's a real membership that I've actually helped with. And like, it doesn't matter. That's all the same. But my story had to be told correctly in a way that would not make them believe in me and my business, but would like make them believe in their story and their idea and their self and their why and their where they want to go. So that started my journey as a speaker, as a podcaster, as a storyteller. And I actually I think 1 year I did like almost 200 interviews or something crazy. Like I was like, I've got to go out and tell this story, not just ego driven. This is my life story. The ultimate goal was look what a guy and a girl from Kentucky did. And if we can do that, you can do it too. But to convince them of that, they have to feel the emotion of that story. And that's what really taught me the power of going out and speaking what you're trying to do. Like take a commercial real estate investor. Like if you're syndicating a like a 200 door apartment complex, you're not just going to walk in and say, hey, this is a good deal on paper. You still got to tell the story of why it's a good investment. And they have to feel the emotion of the returns and the good that it's going to do for the community. That's how you build community. That's how you build connection. That's how you build consensus around anything you're doing in business or investing. So that's kind of the process that got me into Flip Lifestyle, and also going out and helping other people from so many different walks of life. So I've had doctors, I've had dentists, and I've had immigrants from Guatemala that could barely speak English when they got to this country, all go through that program and build and create their stories through our courses. So that's how I got into all that, and that's how we serve so many different people.
Shane, I love it. You talked about the emotions and being able to tell your story, and that was really the key ingredient, right? And the thing that's cool too is like we all have our own story, right?
Yeah,
We
man.
all have our own motivations, our own story, the experiences that we've had, and that's unique. You may not have a different deal. I'm sure there are other coaches who teach, the
Sure.
same things, but your story is your story, and I think that's something we can't discredit. Your experiences and what got you involved. You obviously went through a process to learn how to tell your story the right way, right? You talked about the emotions and making sure that you were hitting on the key points. And that's something that definitely is a skill that needs to be developed over time, right? I know that you
100%.
have really worked hard to get good at that. Can you just share a little bit more about what it takes to tell a good story from a business standpoint so that you can deliver, drive more sales, close investors, and ultimately grow your business?
Yeah, I can talk through a little framework here, but like on the back side of that, you said something really interesting. That's got to be developed 100%. And that development always starts with the planning of the story you need to tell, right? You have to figure out like what emotions do you need to capture. You have to think about it from that level. Then you have to look at it from the framework that you tell it. You got to look at it from the time that you have to tell it. Like I told my story here, a little bit of my story this a minute ago, probably 5 minutes we spent on that little part at the beginning. But that's a 45-minute talk on another Saturday. You got to have these different versions of it for the elevator pitch, for the boardroom, for the on stage, for the different things. And I'll tell you how I developed my skill set. One, I have done a massive amount of studying of stories. Reading book after book after book. I'm on the science of storytelling and why we're hardwired for story and all that. So I've put in that legwork, but I shortcut that with frameworks that I can give to people so they can get there. But also just being able to tell your story a lot of times in a lot of places. I think that everyone in this day and age should have a podcast or a social media channel where they are telling their story all the time, to practice it on video, to practice it on audio, even if no one's listening. Like I've told my kids, like if there's one skill I can give you, it's to say words out loud. Start your own podcast. I don't care if anybody's listening. Get on Instagram and just tell a 2-minute version of your story. The more you say it out loud, the more you hear it, the more people might engage with it, and the more feedback you can get from that. Now, if you're actually telling a story, there's a pretty simple framework. I'm going to break it down very simple for the audience, just so they get the 4 or 5 main points. This is where everyone can start if they're pitching something or they're telling a story. But the first thing people need is some necessary background information, like a prologue, right? That's the first thing in any conversation you're about to have. What do they need to know up to the story you're telling? So, like for mine, in my story, it's, hey, I used to be a school teacher in Southeast Kentucky. That's all the background information that you need, right? For a real estate investor, it might be, hey, I've been syndicating deals for 10 years. Very simple background, shows all they need to know that you know what you're doing, whatever it is. The next thing you need is where the story actually should start. This is where people struggle so bad, man, is they want to tell I was born in Connecticut in 1985. You know what I mean? Like they just go all the way back to the beginning. And it's like, what? That has no relevance. It's like, where does the story start? My story starts in a principal's office who told me I couldn't have a day off work, right? A real estate person might be, the story starts, hey, I've got this great contact and I found this good deal. It's just, where does the story actually start? And then every story needs a problem to solve. This could be a problem you solved in the past. It could be something, a catalyst, like a really bad event. It could be anything like that. So mine is clearly where I found out something was going on with my son, and that's what gave me this motivation. For a real estate deal, it might be something like, hey, look, this place is going to go under. Somebody's going to get this. They're not going to be able to build it up as good as I can, and we could really improve the property values, right? There's a problem here with it. Why is this a good deal? Well, it's because we got to do X, Y, Z, but that's the problem. At that point, once you've framed the problem of the story, stories can't have two problems. You can only tell one thing at a time, right? You can't tell your whole life story. You got to tell the story that you need to tell to close the deal or to make a sale. But like when you have that problem, the rest of the story, man, is just working through the solutions, the potential solutions, by taking action or what actions you're going to take. That's what drives the story, is the attempt to solve that problem. And every story ends with a happy ending, right? Happily ever after. And ever since that day, for this works either in telling a past story or a future paced story. So for my story, I'm like, we quit our jobs, we changed our family's future, and now we've helped thousands of other people do the same thing, right? For a real estate investor, you're casting vision now, right? Vision and story are intricately related. Now it's just like, here's a 3D rendering of what it's going to look like when we get it done. Are you ready to make the deal? And then that framework, that context, like I keep it written. Like when I sit down, I write that framework down before I go on a podcast or I do a podcast or anything. So I have that to follow when I'm telling my stories. But it's just like, here's some information. Once upon a time, a problem started. I took action. We solved the problem. Happy ending. And that little framework, if you start thinking about stories in that way and you start speaking them on your social media or your podcast or to other people, whatever you're doing, you'll see that all of a sudden people's emotions start lighting up. People's eyes start opening up. Then you start working in a joke in one part. Then you start working in a sad part in another part. Then you start playing with those emotions to be able to get people energized and excited about whatever the story is that you're telling. So that's the general framework that I use. I use it whether last weekend I spoke to 3,000 people in Birmingham, Alabama. Same storytelling framework. I was the MC at that event. So I had like 10 segments that were about 5 to 10 minutes long. So I planned every segment to follow that arc. And I was getting fancy on this one, John. I also had the same arc going the whole day. So I had this giant arc through the whole day of this story that I was trying to tell to the end. It started with an Alabama Auburn joke because I knew that Tim Tebow, who was the main speaker, he told an Alabama Auburn joke. So I was like, okay, I'm going to arc these two things together. I'm going to tell jokes and stories along the way to make sure that we get I was trying to set him up to do the happily ever after and tell his joke at the end, and it worked flawlessly, right? So this framework guides you through whatever story you're trying to tell. And God, how many stories do we tell a day, man? It's the most important skill we have in any negotiation or anything. So like, why do we not work on this more? You can't just show up and tell a great story. You got to kind of think it out.
Shane, I love everything you said, man. Just understanding the framework. I mean, I kind of wrote it down where you got the prologue, right? Whatever background information is necessary, the
Yep.
start of the story, not necessarily when you were born, not necessarily day one of whatever business, but where does the story actually start? Then there's got to be a problem to solve. And the thing that you just hit on, which I think is key, is you said there's got to be one problem to solve, not multiple
Yeah,
problems
man.
to solve. You got to really key in on one. And then from there, it's really about the attempts you take to solve that problem and ultimately leading to the happily ever after part of that, or the vision of here's
Yeah.
what the project's going to look like when it's done.
And that, and in that simple framework, then what happens is, like, just like I told you just now, like, I mean, I failed miserably for my sixth. I'm open with telling that. If you don't talk about the failures that you have, some people are so guarded. Hey, how you doing? I'm an investor. Hey, how you doing? I'm a businessman. Hey, we're going to do this. Everyone's trying to like posture like they're perfect and got it all together. When really, let's be face it, people, we're all dumpster fires at the end. And like, there's you have to share these failures, because if you're not vulnerable and showing failure, how can you give yourself something to overcome? And how can you prove that you can overcome failures? And we talk about our mentors. Like you and I talk about this all the time, man. Like I want to give credit and praise to show my lineage from my mentor, not, oh my gosh, they might call my mentor instead of me, right? So we share about our mentors. And all of a sudden, when you start adding these elements in, your life story becomes Lord of the Rings and it becomes captivating. And look at my story. I'm a football coach from Kentucky that started a website about librarians. That's not exciting when you just tell the facts of it. I mean, yeah, there was some money made, but it's like, no, that's not the story. That's just the outcome of the story. That's one of the byproducts of the story. We add these layers in. Now, the problem a lot of people get into is first, they don't know where to start. Second, they don't say enough and they don't do it in order. And then we say too much. And all of a sudden, we're trying to talk for 5 hours about a 5-minute story. One of my favorite quotes is from Mark Twain. He said, he has a quote that said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. Once you get the story out and you kind of get it rolling where you can tell it everywhere you go, you got to edit it down. You got to clean it up and make it like every word matters. You've got to tighten that thing up so you can present it like very, very, very clearly. And people think they have to tell a story about everything, but like, man, I've been telling my same story for 12 years. I've had tens of thousands of people see me speak live. God knows how many on all the podcasts I've done and been on, right? I mean, our podcast has 3 million downloads by itself. So like, and I've been on all these other podcasts. One of my podcast guest appearances, I think, was downloaded like 20 million times or something like
Wow.
that. Yeah. So I mean, it's the same story. Once you anchor in on who you are and who you want to be and your story from the past and your vision for the future, just take it on the road, baby. Find a new audience every single week and tell it. And find a new investor every single week and tell it. It's not, you don't got to reinvent the wheel. Just adjust it a little bit. And man, great things can happen when you start being able to do that consistently.
Shane, great advice, and I love everything you just shared with us about how to tell our stories better, how to identify what we need to be talking about, and also just refining it, right? And the thing that you hit on, which I want to make sure our listeners really understand, is it is a skill that you have
Mhm.
to develop, that you have to
It's a
practice,
muscle.
that you have to work on. So
Yeah, man.
it's not like you could just take the framework you just laid out, jot down some answers to it, and now you're set. You're going to be a sales machine, right? You've got to continue to refine it, figure out what works. You mentioned adding emotion, maybe a joke, and it does take some work for someone who is listening to us and maybe is just not convinced. And I don't want to convince necessarily, but someone who's more like, no, I'm just going to tell them the facts, right? Hey, here's this, here's this. My business is more about sales. It's about facts. It's not so about stories and emotions. What lingering, I guess, feedback or thoughts would you give that person maybe reconsider?
I'll give you some facts if you want some facts. So one of my businesses, I'm a speaker, and we started this seminar company back in like 2021, right? So I would go out and do a 2-day seminar, which I'm sure many real estate people out there you've been at, and you learn so much in those 2 days. But the goal of that seminar is to sell my products and services at the end of it. That's the goal, right? And the sales process, I mean, I had a 16-hour presentation that was spread over 2 days, and it was all driven by stories and testimonials, and also lots of how-to workshopping and getting people where they needed to be. You could have walked out of there and done whatever you wanted, but then if you wanted coaching to go faster, we sold that. And I had some great speakers on my team. Like some of my sales guys were sales speakers and really good at what they did. And we geeked out on these things. Like we would fly to we'd go to a weekend in Chicago and just sit around and work on the presentations over and over and over again to see where we're really hitting things. And 85% of that presentation was designed to sell things by making sure that people believed in themselves, found their idea, and had the tools available to them to go do it. And it was all based on like emotions. And we had like 27 objections that we had to kill through the seminar that people had. These are mindset things like imposter syndrome. I don't have time to do this. Like all these little things that we had to overcome to do it. And 85 to 90% of them were things that were directly tied to emotion. And the only way to generate emotion is with story. The other 15%, which was maybe that last hour of day two, we called that the analyticals. There's always people who want every last drop of information before they'll do something. But that's seriously, that only represented about 10 to 15% of our sales. Those people were, and they weren't even really convinced by the facts and the charts and the things that we included to make sure that they had that verifiable information they could go research and do their thing with. They were still emotionally satisfied because the story had the end. The last slide of the last thing was all the numbers that they needed. And then it said the end. And that completion is what gave them that emotion, right? So even with your analytical people, even with some people who are just facts driven and all that, like you can focus on that. You can do that. But I can tell you from experience and data, that is a small percentage of the people who would actually buy your product or invest in your deal. Everybody else is making an emotional decision based on a fear, a mindset issue, an objection. And the only way you can do that is, hey, imposter syndrome. Here's a lady that had imposter syndrome and she was successful. Oh, you didn't have the time. You got 3 kids. I get it. This is Nicole. She had 6 kids. Let me show you how she got over her time problems, right? These stories are what actually close most of the deals, the emotion of things. And then that other subset, it's just a smaller part of the market. So you can go after them. You're going to have less success in the long run.
Shane, appreciate the context there. Very helpful. And again, hopefully our listeners understand how important it is to be able to tell your story, to hone that as a craft and a skill. And if they want to learn more about Flip Lifestyle or some of the things you've got going on, they can check out your website, shanesams.com. We're going to put a link to that in our show notes. What I didn't mention is you just released a brand new book, Earn
I'm an
More,
author, baby.
Live More.
On the
You are
byline,
officially
son.
an author. Tell us a little bit
man.
more about what you've included in this book.
Yeah, man. Earn More, Live More is it's the story, my entire story of how we became successful entrepreneurs. We also feature about 16 of our favorite students from the Flip Lifestyle community who have built crazy businesses, man, in every possible niche. I mean, health, business, chickens, homeschooling, like all kinds of different stories, just so we can see like how all of this stuff is available for everybody. It's called Earn More, Live More, How to Build a Life of Freedom by Making Money Online. And it's an awesome book. It's got a how-to section to show you how to set up an online business. And I tried to literally take everything I knew and cram it into a book that anyone could use to get started, and they would be motivated to get started. So it's Earn More, Live More. You can get a copy at shanesams.com. And I've also got a lot of stuff on that website about storytelling and workshops and all the things that I do for people out there, making it happen.
I love it, man. All right, let's transition to our round of insights. Shane, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Oh man, I got a good one. This might take just a second. Okay, we'll go faster. Like so I'm a speaker, and the worst possible thing for a speaker, like people think we're all courageous and we go out on stage and we kill it. We're actually terrified of failure and embarrassment, and that's why we put ourselves in these situations to prove we can get through it without it. And I had an event one time where the only thing that could have happened is if I had walked out naked on stage. It's the only thing that could have made this story worse. But I was backstage, I was hosting an event, and I thought the speaker was done. The producer thought the speaker was done, and I thought it was time to go pull him off stage. And I looked through the curtain, and I see him wave into the crowd saying, thank you, thank you. And I walked out, and I said, everyone give it up for, and I started that. And he walked off stage and he looked confused, and then I looked around and the crowd looked confused, and I looked down at this lady that works for me on the road, and she's dying laughing, and she looks up at me and starts like waving her hand by her neck like cut, and he goes, he wasn't finished. He didn't even make his pitch. Here's what he was doing. I was at a conservative event, and he had stood up all the veterans, and he was recognizing the veterans when I interrupted him, dude. The worst case possible scenario for a speaker. And thank goodness I had seen him before and I knew what he was supposed to say at the end. So I just went ahead and said it, and then I just walked off stage and thought I was going to die. So, but the next event after that, it was a few weeks later, I doubled down on my preparation. I got to overcome my fear, and I went out and delivered the best performance of my life. So that failure, right at first, was very triggering, and I wanted to just crawl into the fetal position. But then later on, I was like, no, man, you just survived the worst case scenario. There's nothing left to stop you. Let's go have a good time. So it took away the fear by experiencing it in real life.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that, man. I can only imagine what
That's
that felt
terrible.
like there.
It was terrible, dude. It was awful.
Shane, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
Yeah, the big resource that we recommend for anybody wanting to have any kind of online presence is a tool called Kajabi, Kajabi.com. I've been promoting this product for years because we use it for everything we do. And it's when I started out, you had to code everything. And I had to go buy a book at the bookstore to teach me HTML code. Now, building a website, building an online presence, building a coaching program or community is as easy as, Facebook to use or some kind of word processor. So that's a great tool. It's a low-cost tool, easy to use. And if anybody's looking to establish a presence online, even if it's just, for your local real estate business, it's so good at what it does, and it's so clean, and it has just enough bells and whistles where you don't want any more. So Kajabi is probably my best tool online.
Besides your own book, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I'd say probably a book by Mike Michalowicz called Profit First. I actually just recommended that to a friend 2 days ago. She's a real estate investor up in Louisville, and she was really getting into learning how to balance business, book, finances, pay her taxes, all that good stuff. That book, I got it when it first came out in 2015. I know Mike, I've been on his podcast, and it revolutionized the way I thought about my money. I have never missed my taxes. I have always been profitable, and I give that book and the theories in it. It's a simple concept. It's just starting at the gross and taking a certain amount of percentages for some certain categories. But man, it changes the way you think about your money, paying yourself. And that's probably the book I recommend the most to everybody. My favorite book, though, here's a bonus, is Marcus Aurelius Meditations, the Stoic philosopher. So I think every business person should read that book so they don't freak out when quarterly reports come out. So,
give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Oh man, I think my two most important habits that I've tried to maintain my entire career as an entrepreneur are: I have to go to the gym, even if it's just to sit in the sauna. I don't work out every single time I go. There's a tan in bed there. I'll get the tan in bed. But I need that ritual of going to the gym and just walking in. I feel like my day starts because I'm putting my health and my body first. Everything else can come second. But the habit stack that is always off the back of is the first thing I do every morning. I don't check my email. I don't sit around and work. I wake up my kids and I hang out with them and I take them to school. I'm sad because my son's about to drive and I'm not going to get to do it anymore. But I've taken my kids to school probably 90% of the days they've been in school since we've been entrepreneurs. And I know I've invested in my kids first every single day when I do that. So those are the two habits I start out with every morning.
Give me your number one insight for being an effective storyteller.
I have a saying: money flows to the truth. If you're being your most authentic self and you're not trying to hype, you don't have to hype. Your story is emotional and good and human enough. Like if you're just totally yourself, totally authentic, totally truthful, then everything as a storyteller is going to flow back to you, right? And I'll tell you a real quick aside to this. When we first launched our podcast, I was so scared that people would judge me because of my Southeast Kentucky accent, man. I was just so scared of it that people wouldn't realize that I actually did know what I was talking about because they would think I was just some dumb hillbilly from the mountains. And right before we launched our first podcast, I remember saying to my wife, this is who we are. And some people aren't going to like it. Some people aren't going to believe it. But we've got to be who we are so that when the people show up and pay us, they're getting what they paid for, right? And they know it going in. So just be truthful, be authentic, and really live in yourself and your passions, and let people see the real you, not the mask. And that's always going to be, you're always going to be a better storyteller if you're coming from a place of honesty and truth.
Shane, I love that and appreciate that. Last question here. You are in Eastern Kentucky. Give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh man. Well, in Corbin, Kentucky, where I live, we do have the first original Kentucky Fried Chicken. That is where Colonel Sanders cooked his first bucket of chicken. Did you know that? Did you know that?
I did not know
It
that.
is on the
No.
national monument. It is 100%. We got a copper statue of him or something in the middle of the town square. But that's not my favorite place to eat. Is not there. Actually, where I come from, if you're ever passing through, there's a great place here called the Wrigley Tap Room. It was actually featured on like Diners, Dives, and whatever or something. And great burgers, great Brussels sprouts. So that's probably my favorite place to eat. If you ever
Wrigley
pass it
Tap
down
Room.
I-75, there's just something good.
All right, man. Next time we'll meet in person there. Shane,
At the
good stuff,
KFC, man. Yeah, man.
Great stuff, man. Appreciate you sharing so many insights, man. Just learning a little bit more about your story, what kind of got you going, motivated to make a change, And I think too, going back to that time frame, launching an online business certainly had more challenges than today. So if
Mm-hmm.
you could do it back then and helping so many other entrepreneurs, someone listening to us right now could certainly take that next step. If you do want to learn more about that step and being able to tell your story and help other people, go to shanesams.com. Make sure you check out his book, Earn More, Live More. Really, some really great resources that you have and you've built for other people. And I just appreciate, the friendship and all the great information that you've shared with me, Shane. Thank you for coming on the show today and sharing it with our audience. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.